Elena Voss stood at the center of the great station, her uniform clean and pressed, her face calm. Around her, delegates from many worlds filled the hall. Today was a day that came only once, in a very long time. Every 900 years, the peace treaty between the Galactic Empire and humanity had to be renewed. It had never failed. Not once. Both sides had kept their word for 9 centuries, and most people in the galaxy believed it always would. Elena did not feel nervous. She had trained for this moment for years. She was the leader of the human delegation, chosen because she was steady, smart, and respected by both her own people and by many outside worlds. She had spent her whole life working for peace, and she believed in it deeply. The station itself was neutral ground, built long ago just for this purpose. It floated between Empire space and human space, a place where no weapons were allowed and no armies could enter. Both sides trusted this rule completely. It had worked for hundreds of years. Across the room stood the Imperial delegation. At their front was a new envoy named Doran Vex. He was tall, with sharp eyes and a proud walk. He had grown up hearing stories of the Empire's great victories, of species who bowed before its power. He had never fought in a real war. He had never seen humans in battle. To him, humans were just another small, quiet species who signed papers and stayed out of the way. Doran did not hate humans. He simply did not respect them. He saw the peace treaty as something the Empire allowed to continue, not something it needed. In private conversations with his officers, he had said more than once that humans were lucky the Empire let them keep their little corner of space. The ceremony began with speeches. Leaders from both sides spoke about trust, about the value of peace, about all the good that had come from 900 years without war. Elena spoke last for the humans. Her words were short and simple. "Peace is not weakness," she said. "Peace is a choice we make every single day. Humanity chooses it again today." Many in the room nodded. Some of the other species present, who had seen wars before, understood the weight of her words. But Doran Vex only smiled a thin smile. He leaned toward one of his officers and whispered something that made the officer laugh quietly. The signing of the treaty was to happen in 3 steps. First, both sides would place their hands on the treaty stone, an old device that recorded agreement using biological signatures. Second, the leaders would speak the treaty oath aloud. Third, both delegations would step back, and the treaty would be sealed for another 900 years. Elena stepped forward first, as was tradition for the side that had called for this renewal meeting. She placed her hand on the stone. It glowed softly, accepting her signature. She began to speak the oath, her voice steady and clear, but as she spoke, something felt wrong. Doran Vex was not moving toward the stone. He stood still, watching her, his hand resting near his side. One of the human guards near the back of the room noticed this and felt a small chill of worry, but said nothing. Surely nothing could go wrong here, not on neutral ground, not after 900 years. Elena finished her part of the oath. Now it was time for Doran to step forward and do the same. He did not move right away. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his eyes had changed. It was not respect. It was not even simple dislike. It was something colder. "Commander Voss," he said, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. 900 years is a long time, perhaps too long. Perhaps it is time the terms of this treaty were reconsidered. A murmur spread through the hall. This was not part of the ceremony. This was not how things were done. Elena kept her calm. "The terms were agreed to long before either of us was born," she said. "They are not open for change today. If your side wishes to discuss new terms, there is a proper process for that, after the renewal." "Proper process," Doran repeated, almost mocking. "Humans do love their processes, their patience, their waiting." He took a slow step toward her. "Tell me, Commander, in 900 years, what exactly has humanity built? What have you done with all that patience?" Elena did not answer right away. She had faced difficult people before. She knew that staying calm was often the strongest thing she could do. "We have built peace," she finally said. "We have built lives, billions of them. Is that not enough?" Doran's jaw tightened. Something about her calm answer angered him more than any insult could have. He had come here expecting an easy, symbolic moment, a chance to show his superiors he could handle even the most routine diplomatic events. Instead, standing before him was a woman who did not flinch, who did not bow, who did not even seem afraid. In his mind, this was a great insult. In his mind, no small species should be able to stand this steady in front of the Empire. His hand moved to the weapon at his side. In the entire history of the treaty station, this had never happened. Guards on both sides watched him, confused, unsure if they were seeing things correctly. Weapons were not even supposed to work on this station, but Doran had used technology from his personal guard unit, a private device that had been smuggled past the station's defenses. "This is not a threat," Doran said quietly, almost to himself. "This is a lesson." He raised the weapon and fired. The sound was small, almost nothing, just a short burst of light. Elena felt the impact hit her shoulder and side, and she fell backward onto the floor. Screams filled the hall. Human guards rushed forward. Imperial officers stood frozen, shocked at what their own envoy had just done. Doran stood still for a moment, looking down at what he had done, as if only now understanding it. Then his own officers grabbed him and pulled him back, shouting for medical teams, shouting for order. Elena lay on the ground, blood spreading across her uniform. She was still breathing, but barely. Marcus Holt, who had been standing near the back as part of the security team, rushed forward and knelt beside her. He pressed his hands against her wound, trying to slow the bleeding, his face pale with fear and anger. "Stay with me," he said quietly. "Stay with me, Elena." The treaty stone, still glowing from her signature, flickered and went dark. It would not glow again. The oath had not been completed. The 900 years of peace, kept alive through so many generations, ended in that single moment, on the floor of a station built only for peace. News of the shooting spread through both empires within hours. The empire's leaders were horrified, worried about what their own soldier had done, worried about the consequences. They quickly issued a statement, calling it a terrible mistake, a single officer acting alone, promising full investigation and justice. But on human worlds, the reaction was different. There was no shouting, no public anger, no demands for immediate revenge. Instead, there was a strange, heavy quiet, spreading from world to world like a wave. The Empire, watching this quiet response, made the same mistake many others had made before. They believed silence meant weakness. They believed a lack of loud anger meant humans were too shocked, too small, too afraid to respond in any real way. They did not understand. Human leaders across every colony and station were already meeting. Old plans, kept secret for centuries, were being pulled out and reviewed. Marcus Holt, still covered in Elena's blood, was already speaking quietly into a communicator, giving orders that had been prepared for exactly this kind of moment. Orders that very few people even knew existed. The peace treaty was broken, but humanity was not simply reacting. Humanity was remembering. 900 years of preparation, of quiet patience, of building without showing, was about to be tested for the very first time. And somewhere far away, in a hospital bed surrounded by monitors and quiet machines, Elena Voss opened her eyes just enough to hear the news that the treaty had ended. She did not smile. She did not cry. She only whispered one word before closing her eyes again to rest and heal. Finally. The news of Elena Voss's shooting spread across the Empire like wildfire, but not in the way its leaders wanted. They had hoped to control the story, to frame it as a small, sad accident caused by one bad officer. Instead, footage from the station, captured by security systems that Doran Vex had not thought to disable, reached every corner of known space within a single day. Billions of beings, human and otherwise, watched the moment the shot was fired, watched Elena Voss fall, watched the treaty stone go dark. The Empire's leaders gathered in an emergency session on their home world. The Grand Council, made up of representatives from every major imperial territory, sat in a large circular chamber, arguing over what to do next. Some wanted to execute Doran Vex immediately, to show the galaxy that his actions were not approved. Others worried this would look weak, an admission that the Empire had lost control of its own officers. Still others quietly wondered if humans would even fight back at all. "They have not attacked," one counselor said, looking at reports from human space. "No warships have moved, no demands have been made. Perhaps they understand this was a mistake, not an act of war." Another counselor, older and more cautious, shook his head slowly. "I have studied human history," he said. "They do not shout before they act. They watch, they wait. Silence from humans is not the same as silence from us." Most of the council did not listen to him. They were used to dealing with species who reacted quickly, who either attacked right away or back down completely. Humans did neither. This confused them, and their confusion led them to underestimate what was really happening. Meanwhile, deep within human space, on a quiet moon far from any major Imperial trade route, Marcus Holt stood in front of a room full of senior officers and engineers. His hands were still faintly stained from Elena's blood, though he had washed them many times since. He had not slept. He did not plan to sleep for a while. Behind him, on a large screen, was a map of human space and the surrounding regions. Small markers dotted the map, some blinking softly, most completely dark. 900 years ago, Marcus said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion, our ancestors made a choice. They chose peace, but they also chose to prepare, quietly, in case peace ever failed. Every generation since has added to that preparation. Ships, defenses, technology kept hidden, not because we wanted war, but because we understood that peace without strength is just hope. He pointed to the dark markers on the map. These are not abandoned outposts. These are not empty stations. Each one has been maintained, updated, and kept ready for exactly this moment. Today, we begin waking them up. A young officer near the front raised her hand. Sir, if we mobilize now, the Empire will see it. They will think we are preparing to attack them first. Marcus nodded slowly. They may think that, but we are not attacking. We are simply no longer hiding what we always had. There is a difference, and the galaxy will come to understand it. Across human space, quiet signals were sent out, coded messages that had been prepared decades earlier, waiting for a day many hoped would never come. Shipyards that appeared abandoned on the surface began powering up hidden lower levels. Old satellites, thought to be nothing more than communication relays, revealed sensor arrays and defense systems built into their cores. None of this was rushed. None of this was loud. It happened exactly the way it had been planned, calmly and carefully, like a machine finally being allowed to do the job it was built for. Daniel Reyes, a diplomat who had worked closely with Elena Voss for many years, arrived at the hospital where she was recovering. He found Marcus Holt sitting outside her room, staring at nothing in particular. How is she? Daniel asked quietly. Stable, Marcus said. The doctors say she will recover, but it will take time. She lost a lot of blood. He paused, then added, she was lucky. Daniel sat down beside him. The Empire is asking for a meeting, he said. They want to discuss what happened. They are offering an apology, compensation, promises of justice for the officer responsible. Marcus's jaw tightened. And what do our leaders want to do? Nothing. For now, Daniel said. No response yet. Just watching, listening, gathering information. He glanced at Marcus. You have already started moving ships, haven't you? Marcus did not deny it. We are not attacking anyone, Daniel. We are simply making sure that if this becomes something bigger, we are not caught unprepared. We were unprepared once, a very long time ago, before the treaty was even signed. We do not intend to make that mistake again. Daniel understood. He had studied the old records, the ones very few people outside the highest levels of government were allowed to see. Humanity's early history in space had been difficult, full of near disasters and close calls with more powerful species. The treaty with the Empire had given humans 900 years of peace, but the lessons from before the treaty had never been forgotten. Every generation had been taught, quietly, that peace could end, and that when it did, humanity needed to be ready. The Empire does not know what we have, Daniel said, almost to himself. No, Marcus agreed. They do not. Back on the Imperial homeworld, the Grand Council finally reached a decision regarding Doran Vex. He would face a public trial, and if found guilty, he would be executed as an example. This was meant to show humanity, and the rest of the galaxy, that the Empire took the incident seriously. But Doran Vex, sitting alone in a holding cell awaiting his trial, did not seem afraid. In fact, he seemed almost pleased with himself. When questioned by Imperial investigators about why he had fired on Elena Voss, his answer was simple and cold. I wanted to see what they would do, he said. For 900 years, we have called them allies, but they have always been beneath us. I wanted to see if there was any strength behind all that patience, or if it was simply weakness dressed up as wisdom. The investigators asked him if he regretted his actions. Doran considered the question for a long moment. Ask me again, he said, after we see how they respond. His words were reported to the Grand Council, And though most counselors dismissed them as the rambling excuses of a guilty man, the older counselor, who had studied human history, took them more seriously. He requested a private meeting with the Empire's military leadership, wanting to discuss what preparations, if any, should be made in case humanity's response was not as small as everyone hoped. His request was denied. The council believed the matter was already handled. Doran Vex would be punished, an apology had been sent, and human space remained quiet. As far as most of the Empire's leaders were concerned, the crisis was already over. They had no idea that hundreds of hidden shipyards were now fully active. They had no idea that ancient warships, built long before the treaty, but hidden ever since, were being brought back online, their systems tested for the first time in centuries. They had no idea that human scientists, following plans passed down through generations, were preparing weapons and defenses that had never been shown to anyone outside human space. On the quiet moon, Marcus Holt watched as the last of the major shipyards reported full activation. The map on the screen behind him, once mostly dark, now glowed steadily with active markers across dozens of systems. It was not a fleet built for conquest. It was not a fleet built to strike first. It was something else entirely, something the Empire had never had to face before. It was a fleet built by a species that had spent 900 years preparing for exactly one day, a fleet built not out of fear, but out of quiet, patient resolve. Marcus looked at the map for a long moment, before turning to the officer beside him. "Send word to all commanders," he said. "No aggressive movements, no attacks. We wait for the Empire's next move, but we make sure, when they look closely enough, they understand exactly what they are dealing with." Far away, in her hospital room, Elena Voss slowly opened her eyes again. A nurse nearby noticed and quietly informed Daniel Reyes, who had been waiting nearby for any sign of her waking. He hurried to her side. "Elena," he said softly, "can you hear me?" She blinked slowly, her voice weak but clear. "The treaty," she whispered. "Is it truly broken?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." Elena was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then, softly, she asked another question. "And our people? Are we ready?" Daniel glanced toward the window, toward the sky, where, unseen by most, human ships were quietly taking their positions for the very first time in 900 years. "Yes," he said. "We are ready." 3 weeks passed since the shooting on the treaty station. To the outside galaxy, very little seemed to have changed. Human space remained quiet. No official statements had been made beyond a short message, acknowledging the attack and confirming that Elena Voss was recovering. The Empire, still believing this silence meant humanity had accepted the apology and compensation offered, began to relax. But within human space, everything had changed. Marcus Holt stood on the bridge of a ship called the Endeavor, one of many vessels that had been hidden for centuries, only recently brought back into full operation. The ship was old by human standards, built using knowledge passed down from before the treaty, but it had been maintained and quietly upgraded, generation after generation. Its systems hummed with a strange mix of old design and new technology, a machine built to last far longer than anyone had expected it would need to. Around him, officers moved calmly between stations, checking readings, confirming positions. This was not a crew rushing into battle. This was a crew that had trained for this exact moment for years, most of them their entire lives, without ever knowing if it would actually come. "Report," Marcus said. A young officer named Captain Lin looked up from her console. "All defensive positions are active, sir. Fleet Alpha is in position along the outer border. Fleet Beta is holding near the shipyards. Fleet Gamma remains hidden near the asteroid fields as planned." Marcus nodded. This was the strategy that had been developed decades earlier, refined by each generation of military planners since the treaty was first signed. Humanity would not attack. Humanity would not even reveal its full strength unless absolutely necessary. Instead, defenses would be positioned quietly, ready to respond the moment they were needed, but never shown unless the Empire forced the issue. It was a strategy built on patience, the same patience Doran Vex had mocked on the treaty station, the same patience many species in the galaxy saw as weakness. Far from the border, on a private estate on the Imperial homeworld, Doran Vex's trial had finally concluded. Despite his cold words to investigators, the Grand Council had decided that a public execution would create too much attention, too many questions about how a lone officer could smuggle a weapon onto a station that was supposed to be completely secure. Instead, They quietly sentenced him to life imprisonment on a distant world, away from any media or public attention. This decision, meant to make the entire incident disappear quietly, was itself a mistake. Word of the light sentence reached human space within days, carried by neutral trade ships and diplomatic channels. It was seen not as justice, but as another sign that the Empire did not take the attack on Elena Voss seriously. Elena herself, still recovering, but growing stronger each day, watched the news of the sentencing from her hospital bed. Daniel Reyes sat beside her, his face tense. Life imprisonment, Daniel said, not even close to what a public execution would have meant. They are trying to make this go away quietly. Elena was quiet for a moment. They still do not understand, she said finally. This was never about revenge for me. It was never about Doran Vex specifically. It is about whether they believe the treaty, and everyone bound by it, actually matters. And now they have shown they do not think it matters much at all, Daniel said. Elena nodded slowly. Then we must show them it matters to us. Back in human space, the quiet military buildup continued, growing more organized and more capable each day. Deep beneath the surface of a heavily fortified moon, scientists worked on completing weapons systems that had been designed decades earlier, but never fully built, waiting only for the day they might actually be needed. These were not weapons of conquest. Human scientists and military planners had always focused on defense, on protecting their worlds rather than expanding beyond them. But defense, refined over 900 years of careful planning, could be a very powerful thing indeed. One such project, known simply as the Shield Array, was a network of defensive stations positioned throughout human space, capable of detecting and responding to threats long before they reached inhabited worlds. Another project called Steadfast involved a class of warships built specifically to withstand and outlast attacks from larger, more powerful forces, trading speed and aggression for endurance and resilience. Marcus Holt reviewed reports on both projects daily, watching as each system moved from theoretical readiness to full operational capability. He was not interested in surprising the Empire with sudden, overwhelming force. He wanted the Empire to see, clearly and calmly, exactly what humanity had built, and to understand that any attempt to threaten human space further would come at a tremendous cost. This was the heart of humanity's strategy, one that had been passed down and refined since before the treaty was even signed. Strength was not something to hide completely, nor something to use recklessly. Strength was something to hold quietly in reserve, revealed only when necessary, used only as a last resort. Elsewhere, on the Imperial homeworld, the older counselor who had studied human history requested another meeting with military leadership, this time bringing detailed reports on ancient human conflicts, wars fought long before the treaty, wars that most in the Empire had never bothered to study closely. Look at this, he said, showing his colleagues records from centuries past. Before they ever left their home system, humans fought each other in wars that lasted for years, sometimes decades. They developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities, long before they even had space travel. When they finally did leave their world, they did not do so carelessly. They did so with extreme caution, always preparing, always planning for the worst, even while hoping for the best. One of the military leaders frowned at the reports. This was all a very long time ago. Surely they have grown soft during 900 years of peace. The older counselor shook his head firmly. That is exactly the mistake we are making. 900 years of peace does not mean 900 years of forgetting. If anything, it means 900 years of preparation, carried out quietly, exactly the way their history shows they operate best. His warnings were once again largely ignored. Most of the Empire's leadership still believed that humanity, having said nothing publicly and taken no visible aggressive action, had simply accepted the situation. They saw the lack of retaliation as proof of weakness, rather than what it truly was: patience while preparations were completed. This assumption led the Grand Council to make a decision that would prove to be their greatest mistake yet. Believing that a show of continued imperial authority was needed to reassure other species in the galaxy that the Empire remained strong despite the incident, they decided to send a fleet toward the border of human space. Officially, this fleet was described as a routine patrol, a normal exercise meant to demonstrate that trade routes remained safe and secure. In reality, it was meant to send a clear message: the Empire was still in control, and humanity's silence was simply proof of that continued control. News of the fleet's movement reached Marcus Holt within hours. relayed through hidden sensor arrays positioned along the border, arrays the Empire did not know existed. "How large is this fleet?" Marcus asked, studying the data on his screen. 12 warships, sir," Captain Lin reported, moving toward the border at a steady pace. Their communications describe it as a routine patrol. Marcus studied the star charts carefully. 12 warships was not a massive force by Imperial standards, but it was far more than what would be needed for a simple patrol. This was meant to be seen, meant to send a message. "They want to remind us who holds the power," Marcus said quietly. "Orders, sir?" Captain Lin asked. Marcus considered his response carefully. This was the moment the entire strategy had been built around, the moment where humanity's response would either confirm the Empire's assumptions of weakness, or begin to change them entirely. "No aggressive action," Marcus said finally. "But make sure Fleet Alpha is fully visible along the border. Let them see exactly what is waiting for them, without a single shot being fired. Let them draw their own conclusions." Word was sent to Fleet Alpha, and within hours, as the Imperial fleet approached the border of human space, something happened that had never happened before in the history of the treaty. Human warships, previously hidden and unknown to the Empire, began appearing along their side of the border, positioned calmly and without any aggressive movement, simply present, simply visible. The Imperial fleet commander, watching sensor readings suddenly fill with unfamiliar warship signatures, contacted his superiors immediately, confusion and concern clear in his voice. "Command, we are detecting a significant human military presence along the border," he reported. "These are not small patrol vessels. Sensor readings indicate advanced technology. Some readings we cannot fully identify. Awaiting further orders." Back on the Imperial homeworld, the Grand Council received this report with a mixture of confusion and alarm. This was not the reassurance they had been expecting. This was not proof of human weakness. The older counselor, hearing the report, allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Now," he said quietly to those around him, "perhaps you will begin to understand." Along the border, Marcus Holt watched the Imperial fleet slow its approach, clearly uncertain how to proceed. He allowed himself a small measure of satisfaction, though he knew this was only the very beginning. "They wanted to send a message," he said to Captain Lin. "Let us make certain they understood ours as well." Far away, in her hospital room, Elena Voss received word of the standoff at the border. She listened carefully to the report, then looked toward Daniel Reyes. "No shots fired," she said. "No aggression, just presence." Daniel nodded. "Exactly as planned." Elena allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Good," she said. "Let them see us clearly, for the first time in 900 years. Let them finally understand exactly what patience was protecting." The Imperial fleet held its position along the border for nearly 2 full days, unwilling to advance and unable to retreat, without looking weak in front of their own command. Sensor operators aboard the 12 warships continued scanning the human vessels, now clearly visible across the border, trying to understand exactly what they were looking at. The ships did not match anything in the Empire's records. Their designs were unfamiliar, their power readings unusually strong for vessels of their size, and their formations showed a level of discipline that surprised even experienced Imperial officers. Fleet Commander Auron Koss, leading the Imperial patrol, sent report after report back to the Grand Council, each one more urgent than the last. He requested clear instructions on how to proceed. Should he advance, treating the human presence as a challenge to be met with force? Should he withdraw, risking the appearance of retreat? Or should he simply hold position, waiting for the humans to make the next move? The Grand Council, still divided and uncertain, struggled to agree on a response. Some counselors pushed for a strong show of force, insisting that any hesitation would only encourage humanity to grow bolder. Others, remembering the warnings of the older counselor who had studied human history, urged caution, worried that pushing too hard might lead to a conflict the Empire was not fully prepared for. In the end, the Council chose a middle path that satisfied no one. Commander Koss was ordered to advance slowly, entering human space just far enough to demonstrate that the border remained open to Imperial patrols, but without engaging any human vessels directly. It was meant to be a careful, controlled test of humanity's resolve. It was, in hindsight, the worst possible choice they could have made. As the Imperial fleet began moving forward, crossing into space that human ships now clearly occupied, Marcus Holt watched the development from the bridge of the Endeavour with a calm, measured expression. "They are entering our territory," Captain Lin reported, her voice tight with tension. "Confirmed," Marcus said. "Hold formation. No weapons fire unless they fire first." The Imperial fleet moved cautiously, sensors scanning constantly, weapons systems armed, but not yet targeting any specific vessel. As they advanced, the true scale of humanity's defenses began to reveal itself. What Commander Koss had believed to be a single line of ships turned out to be only the outermost layer of a much larger, carefully hidden formation. Additional human vessels, previously concealed using technology the Empire did not fully understand, began appearing on sensors as the Imperial fleet moved deeper into the contested region. Commander Koss felt a cold unease settle over him as he realized just how badly his forces were outnumbered and outpositioned. He immediately sent an urgent message back to the Grand Council, requesting permission to withdraw. But before a response could arrive, one of his own ships, a smaller escort vessel near the edge of the formation, detected what its sensors interpreted as an imminent human attack, a misreading caused by the unfamiliar energy signatures of nearby human defensive systems. Acting on instinct and fear rather than confirmed orders, the escort vessel's captain fired a single warning shot toward the nearest human ship. It was a small, almost insignificant shot by military standards, easily absorbed by the target ship's shielding without any real damage. But it was, without question, the first shot fired by the Empire since the attack on Elena Voss weeks earlier. And this time, it was fired not at an unarmed diplomat, but at a fully prepared, fully armed human warship. Marcus Holt received the report calmly. "They fired first," he confirmed with Captain Lin. "Confirmed, sir. One shot, minimal damage." "Orders?" Marcus considered the moment carefully. This was exactly the situation humanity had spent 900 years preparing for, and exactly the situation their doctrine had prepared them to handle with precision, rather than blind retaliation. "Target only the vessel that fired," Marcus said. "Disable. Do not destroy. Send a clear message. This was self-defense, not the beginning of a war." Human ships responded immediately and precisely. A focused, controlled strike disabled the offending Imperial escort vessel's weapons and engines within seconds, leaving the crew unharmed, but the ship completely unable to continue fighting. No other human vessel fired a single shot. The response was swift, exact, and deliberately restrained, a clear demonstration of both capability and control. Commander Koss, watching his escort vessel go dark on his sensors, immediately ordered his fleet to hold position and cease all offensive action, horrified at what had just happened without his direct authorization. He opened a channel to the human fleet, requesting to speak with whoever was in command. Marcus accepted the communication request. Koss's image appeared on the main screen, his expression tense and clearly shaken. "This was not an authorized attack," Koss said quickly. "One of my escort captains made an error in judgment. I am prepared to discuss immediate de-escalation." Marcus studied the Imperial commander for a long moment before responding. "Your fleet fired first," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We responded with the minimum force necessary to protect our people. We have no interest in further conflict today, but make no mistake, Commander Koss, humanity did not hide our strength these past 900 years out of fear. We hid it out of respect for peace. That peace was broken by your empire, not once, but twice now. We will not allow it to be broken a third time without serious consequence." Koss, still shaken, nodded slowly. "I will relay your words to the Grand Council," he said. "For what it's worth, Commander, I did not expect this. Any of this. Few in the Empire did," Marcus replied. "That has always been the problem." The Imperial fleet withdrew from human space shortly after, moving cautiously back across the border under close human observation. Commander Koss's report to the Grand Council was detailed and unflinching, describing not only the strength of the human fleet, but also the remarkable discipline and restraint shown throughout the entire encounter. This report, combined with footage and sensor data from the brief encounter, finally began to shift opinion within the Grand Council. Even the most stubborn counselors could no longer dismiss the older counselors' warnings as simple caution. The evidence was now undeniable. Humanity possessed military capability far beyond what anyone in the Empire had believed possible, and they had demonstrated a level of discipline and control that suggested careful, long-term planning rather than a hurried, panicked response. Word of the border incident spread quickly beyond just the Empire and humanity, reaching other species and governments throughout the region who had long watched the treaty between these two powers with quiet interest. Many had assumed, much like the Empire, that humanity was a smaller, weaker partner in the old agreement, tolerated by the Empire rather than respected as a true equal. The border incident, and the calm, precise way humanity had handled it, forced many of these outside observers to reconsider that assumption entirely. Daniel Reyes, following these developments closely from Elena Voss's side, brought her the news as soon as it became available. "They fired first," he told her, "and we answered with exact, controlled force. No unnecessary destruction, no escalation. Just enough to make our point clear." Elena, sitting up in her hospital bed now, stronger than she had been in weeks, nodded slowly. "How is the reaction, beyond the Empire?" "Cautious respect, mostly," Daniel said. "Other governments are reaching out through diplomatic channels, wanting to understand more about what happened. Some are even quietly congratulating us on our restraint." Elena allowed herself a small smile. "Restraint," she repeated softly. "That has always been our greatest strength, even if the galaxy took 900 years to notice it." Back on the Imperial homeworld, the Grand Council convened once more, this time in a far more serious and focused mood than any previous meeting since the crisis began. The older counselor, once largely ignored, now found his warnings taken very seriously indeed. "We must understand," he said to his fellow counselors, "that humanity did not respond with anger or aggression today, despite having every reason to. They responded with precision and restraint, using only the force necessary to protect themselves. This is not the behavior of a species pushed to the edge of desperation. This is the behavior of a species completely confident in their own strength, choosing peace, not because they must, but because they still prefer it." A younger counselor, still struggling to accept this new reality, asked quietly, "Then what do they want from us now?" The older counselor considered the question carefully before answering. "I believe," he said slowly, "they want exactly what they have always wanted: respect, equality. A treaty renewed not out of habit or convenience, but out of genuine understanding between two powers who recognize each other as true equals." Silence filled the chamber as the weight of his words settled over the council. For the first time since the crisis began, there was no argument, no dismissal, no lingering doubt. The evidence had finally become impossible to ignore. Far away, Marcus Holt stood once again on the bridge of the Endeavor, watching as the last of the Imperial fleet disappeared from sensor range, retreating fully back into Imperial territory. Captain Lin approached him quietly. "Do you think they finally understand, sir?" she asked. Marcus considered the question for a long moment, thinking of 900 years of quiet patience, of decades of careful preparation, of countless generations who had worked and waited, without ever knowing if this day would truly come. "They are beginning to," he said finally. "Now it is up to Elena to make sure they understand it completely." 2 months after the shooting on the treaty station, Elena Voss stood once again before a great hall filled with delegates from across the galaxy. This time, the location was different. This time, it was not neutral Imperial ground, but a new station, built jointly by human engineers and representatives from several independent worlds, who had grown increasingly interested in the balance of power between humanity and the Empire. Elena's shoulder still ached sometimes, a reminder of what had happened the last time she stood in a room like this. But she stood tall, her uniform clean, her expression calm and steady, just as it had always been. She had healed, both in body and in resolve, and she carried herself now with a quiet strength that many in the room could feel the moment she entered. The Galactic Council, a much larger gathering than the original treaty ceremony, had been called together at humanity's request. Word had spread throughout known space about the border incident, about the quiet, controlled power humanity had revealed, and many species now wanted to understand exactly what this meant for the future balance of the galaxy. The Empire's delegation arrived, looking notably different from the confident group that had once dismissed humanity as a minor, unambitious species. Their new envoy, an experienced diplomat named Sela Rain, had been carefully chosen to replace Doran Vex, someone known throughout the Empire for caution and careful judgment rather than pride or arrogance. As the council session began, murmurs spread through the hall. Everyone understood the significance of this meeting. This was not simply about renewing an old agreement. This was about redefining the relationship between humanity and the Empire entirely, based on a new, clearer understanding of exactly what humanity truly was. Sela Rain spoke first, her tone measured and respectful. "The Empire acknowledges the events of recent months with deep regret," she said. "The attack on Commander Voss was an unforgivable act, and the subsequent incident at the border was the result of miscommunication and poor judgment on our part. We come here today seeking not simply to renew an old treaty, but to build a new understanding between our peoples, one based on mutual respect rather than assumption. Many in the room watched Elena closely, waiting to see how she would respond. This was the moment 900 years of quiet patience had been building toward, though few beyond humanity's own leadership truly understood the depth of that history. Elena stepped forward, her voice calm and clear as it filled the hall. For 900 years, she began, humanity kept a promise. We chose peace, again and again, even when others believed that peace meant weakness. We built our worlds, raised our families, and lived our lives without ever needing to prove our strength to anyone. She paused, letting her words settle over the room. We did not want war then, and we do not want war now. But peace built on false assumptions is not true peace. It is only a pause, waiting to break at the first sign of pressure. She looked directly at Selarain. The Empire believed our patience was weakness. It was not. It was choice. Every day for 900 years, humanity chose peace, even while we prepared quietly for the possibility that peace might one day fail. We hoped it never would. We are here today because it did. The hall remained silent, every delegate listening closely. We are not here seeking conquest, Elena continued. We are not here seeking revenge for what was done to me, or for what happened at our border. We are here because we believe true peace can only exist between equals, and it is time the galaxy understood exactly what kind of equal humanity has always been. She turned toward a large display behind her, which activated to show a simple, clear outline of humanity's proposed terms for a new treaty. Unlike the original agreement, which had been written primarily by imperial representatives centuries ago, this new treaty had been carefully prepared by human diplomats and legal experts, built on principles of true equality rather than old assumptions of imperial authority. The terms were straightforward. Humanity would maintain full sovereignty over its own space, free from any imperial oversight or interference, a right that had technically existed under the old treaty, but had rarely been treated with real respect by imperial representatives. Trade and diplomatic relations would continue, but through channels that treated humanity as a genuine equal partner rather than a smaller, tolerated neighbor. And any future disputes would be handled through a new, independent council made up of multiple species, rather than relying solely on imperial authority to settle disagreements. Selarain studied the terms carefully, along with the rest of the imperial delegation. There was quiet discussion among them before Sela turned back to address the hall. These terms are fair, she said finally. More than fair, considering the circumstances. The Empire accepts. A wave of quiet relief spread through the room. Many delegates, especially those from smaller species who had long watched the relationship between humanity and the Empire with cautious interest, seemed genuinely pleased by the outcome. A treaty renewed through mutual respect, rather than simple habit or imperial dominance, offered a valuable example for the entire galaxy. But Elena was not quite finished. She raised a hand gently, asking for a moment more of the council's attention. There is one more matter, she said, that I believe deserves to be addressed clearly before this council today. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. For 900 years, many species across this galaxy have looked at humanity and seen only a small, quiet neighbor, content to stay within its own space and cause no trouble. This assumption was not entirely wrong. We are, by nature, a species that values peace over conflict, caution over recklessness. But this assumption led many, including the Empire, to believe that our peaceful nature meant we lacked strength, or resolve, or the ability to protect ourselves and those who depend on us. She looked around the room slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates from many different worlds. Let this moment serve as a clear answer to that assumption. Humanity's strength was never in question. Only our patience was ever truly tested. We hope, sincerely, that no one in this galaxy ever needs to test that patience again. But, should that day come, we will be ready, exactly as we have always been ready, quietly and without need for boasting or threat. Her words settled over the hall, respectful, but unmistakably firm. Even delegates from powerful, well-established species found themselves reconsidering long-held assumptions about humanity's place in the galaxy. After the formal session ended, Elena found a quiet moment alone on a balcony overlooking the stars, away from the crowds and formal discussions. Daniel Reyes joined her after a while, standing quietly beside her for a long moment before speaking. "You did well in there," he said. Elena smiled faintly. "We did well," she corrected. "All of us, 900 years of preparation, carried by generations who never knew if this day would truly come. All, Marcus and his fleet, you and your diplomacy. Everyone who worked quietly, without recognition, simply because it was the right thing to do." Daniel nodded, looking out at the stars. "Do you think the Empire truly understands now, truly respects us, rather than simply fearing us?" Elena considered the question carefully. "I think," she said slowly, "understanding takes time. Respect built on fear alone is fragile. But respect built on genuine understanding, earned through actions rather than words, tends to last far longer." She paused, glancing at him. "We have given them a reason to understand us properly, for the first time in 900 years. What they do with that understanding, now is up to them." Marcus Holt joined them a short while later, having just returned from overseeing final defensive positions along the border. Positions that were now, for the first time in weeks, standing down from full alert. "Fleet Alpha and Beta are returning to standard patrol status," he reported. "Fleet Gamma remains ready, but hidden, exactly as before." Elena nodded. "Good. Let us hope we do not need them again for a very long time." 900 more years? Daniel asked, a small smile touching his lips. "Perhaps longer," Elena said. "But should the day ever come again, sooner or later, humanity will be ready, just as we always have been." The three of them stood together quietly for a while, looking out at the vast expanse of stars, at the many worlds and species that made up the wider galaxy. A galaxy that finally, after 900 years of quiet peace, truly understood exactly what humanity had always been. Not a small, weak neighbor to be tolerated, not a threat to be feared, but a patient, steady equal, quietly ready, exactly when it mattered most.